morning.
Good morning.
My name is Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's Eddie J. Oliver II, and I am 4 years old. I attend the Brownsville Preparatory Institute, and I love to read and build things. I am here to introduce my mom, Dr. Andrea Oliver. She is a college professor and teaches future teachers at Tallahassee Community College. She has a PhD in history and loves to teach and talk about African American history. She is the coordinator of TCC, coordinator of teacher education at TCC, and has been her 12th year there for 12 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my mommy, Dr. Andrea Oliver.
Oh, you go ahead.
You know, we had to let him read that because if y'all didn't know any better, y'all would think, oh, y'all coached him up. Oh, he memorized that, blah, blah, blah. But y'all saw a 4-year-old reading, getting through it.
Real words.
You know, real words in real time. And he just saw that script for the first time Thursday night.
Wow.
So, you know, so to let you know that is real. So many of you or a few of you might have been here last year and kind of remember the conversation that we had. Just out of curiosity, how many of you remember the presentation from last year where we talked about the historical legacy of intellectual excellence among people of African descent? Well, those of you that may remember that may have been very attentive during that presentation and noticed that I mentioned Brownsville Preparatory Institute in my talk, because one of the things that we talked about was bringing that historical legacy into the 21st century. Because what they say about us, about, you know, all of the things having to do with, you know, this achievement gap, you know, between African-American students and Latino students and students of European ancestry. You know, it's much ado about something, because the data shows us that persistent gaps do remain between the groups. And we're not here to diminish that or ignore that or say that something is not the case when in fact it actually is, because we don't deal in alternative facts. Uh-oh, sorry. I had to do that drive-by. And they have found through research, the amount of research that has been done on this has found that even when factors such as parental education and income levels are taken into account, those things that those factors that you think would otherwise mitigate, you know, some of the impact that this so-called achievement gap would have, that yet a gap remains. So the question then becomes, what can be done and what should be done about this problem, and who should be the people who are driving the solutions to try to fix this problem? Because can we agree that it is a problem?
Absolutely.
Can we agree that it is something that needs to be solved?
Yes.
So the question becomes, should we look to the institutions that help to create these inequities to solve the problem? Now, my son told you guys that I am a historian by academic training. My master's degree is in education, and I was in the K-12 classroom for 5 years before moving on to administer programs for at-risk youth in the community that I reside, which is in Tallahassee. And after that, moved into collegiate level teaching, where I've been since 2001. I love to bring in stories about our legacy, those of us of African descent, because I am a firm believer, and Dr. Akua mentioned this, as did the principal on yesterday's keynote luncheon, that our identity has been stolen from us. I think there's a real effort afoot. I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. I won't say that I am one, but I'm a little bit, just a Comanche one. And I do believe that there is a concerted effort on the part of some powerful forces that are trying to make sure that our children don't know the greatness from whence they come. Because how many of you guys ever saw that movie Idiocracy? Oh my goodness. Okay. You might want to Google this one and maybe, do a Netflix and chill if you're into that. But Idiocracy was a movie that was put out in 2006. And if you didn't know any better, you would have thought that movie was produced last month. Because we are living in an idiocracy, or we're definitely on our way to one if we're not there already. And so the question then becomes, why is there this effort to make sure that children, particularly children of color, and dare I say, white children too, why don't we know the full story?
Right.
Now, do you all recognize these ladies? Somebody said it. These are the real life scientists
From NASA.
that were the inspiration behind Hidden Figures. So you have Katherine Johnson, Mary Jackson, and Dorothy Bond. How many of you have heard of those ladies before the movie came out in January? Did you know that the character, Katherine Johnson, who is still living, by the way, she's 96 years old now. She was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015 by then President Barack Obama. And it was her figures that John Glenn, who's heard of John Glenn?
Right.
Everybody's heard of John Glenn. But did you all know that John Glenn said, I'm not going up there unless Katherine Jackson. That wasn't just, y'all remember that scene from the movie?
Yeah. Right.
Do y'all know that wasn't Hollywood fictionalized?
Right.
That really did happen. Now, the thing that I want to point out to you about these ladies is that they are hidden in plain sight.
Wow.
What do I mean by that?
Wow.
Because for a generation of people of African descent in this country, and I have a few in here, I'd like to just kind of pay homage to my father, without whom I wouldn't be here, right? Everybody got a dad. And my mother-in-law, who's like my mother from another mother. These two individuals and members of their generation and those who came before them will tell you that those ladies from the Hidden Figures era, those scientists, those mathematicians, that they were exceptional. I'm sorry, they were excellent, but they weren't exceptional. Y'all know what I mean when I say that? In other words, to put it to you another way, my great aunt, my grandmother's sister, who was one of the first teachers to desegregate the school systems of Madison County, and notice I said desegregate, not integrate, because we didn't integrate. Right. Let's be clear. We desegregated, but we didn't integrate. Some of y'all will get that on the way home, because I believe in the power of language. She used to say, having taught in a segregated school system in the 50s and 60s, that desegregation was the worst thing that happened to Black people. Coming along as I did in the 80s, during the Cosby era, during the, oh, can't we all just get along, kumbaya, we hold hands, that sounded incredibly racist to me at the time. But you know what? Now that I've gotten older, now that I've done the historical research and approached it from a historical and academic point of view, She was absolutely right. In other words, classrooms all across this country were full of Johnsons,
Yes,
Jacksons,
right.
and Bonds.
That's right.
They were excellent, but they weren't exceptional. And it was never a situation where these exceptionalities, this intellectual and academic excellence, was something that was ridiculed, talked about, or mocked as acting white. In fact, that whole acting white stuff didn't come out until desegregation.
Wow.
They didn't hear that growing. Did y'all hear that growing up? When y'all was in school, that if you were smart and you cared about your academics, that you were acting white? It wasn't something that was said. So I like to borrow from the wisdom of the ancestors. Instruction in youth is like engraving in stone. And when you look at any building project, you know that the foundation, right, is the most important thing. You can have the most ornate, elaborate, beautiful structure there is. But if the foundation is shoddy, what kind of building you gonna have? So the question then becomes, going back to that question that was asked in an earlier slide, who should solve that problem about the so-called achievement gap? Where does it start? It starts at the foundation. So when you talk about reawakening the can-do culture, that is what the Brownsville experience is all about. So it's at this time that I want to turn it over to my esteemed associate here, Miss Bridget McLeod. Clap, clap.
Hi, my name is Bridget McLeod. I'm actually a teacher in Leon County. I've taught about 5 or 6 years in the county, and I also have worked with Brownsville over 10 years. I was given the privilege of bringing this all into a research space. We did an 18-month-long research study. It's been a 10-year journey that I've known Brownsville, but we concentrate on those 18 months and what they did with those 18 months, and we turned it around into a research project, and now we're presenting it all. And we've done this with the University of Florida. We come here to tell you a little bit about that research project and show you some products of that project. We believe that kids can do more than what is expected. If you put it before them, they'll show you. Just to believe that this research can change the face of education. A lot of people came, a lot of middle school, high school, elementary school teachers. But at Brownsville, we believe that if we don't go from the bottom up, we'll always be turning kids around. Not that there won't be some turnaround points, but there'll be less turnaround points because we're fixing the bottom and working up from the top. As you see, when kids and they're learning to read and they're going through elementary school, they're not getting phonetic grounding foundations to help stabilize their reading, to help propel them where they need to go. And as you know, how many people were in class and the teacher said, sound it out, and you're thinking, what does that mean? Stop saying that. You had weak phonemic awareness. You didn't know A said and ah. You didn't understand that. Or maybe we do, but the kids today don't. Right. They don't understand that. So that means they have difficulty reading words. They can't decode. There's limited exposure to text. Everybody's going, we don't have books in class. Everything's on the computer. Because they're not being exposed to that, which delays their comprehension. We're waiting to test these kids too late. We're waiting for their reading skills we're not giving them the reading skills they need, and then we're testing them in the 3rd grade, and they're not ready. But we can get them ready if we give them the foundation. We have a couple of fixes. You got to fix the school. You got to fix the parents. This is the fix for the school and the children. We have to give them learning environments that's conducive to the population you serve. A couple of the other speakers touched on that. If they like to rap, if they like to dance, put that academics right there within what they're doing. Structure the learning environment within the classroom setting. That means coming in and you're doing the same thing every single day. If it's the rote learning of those skills, you do that every single day. This year I'm going to be teaching a kindergarten space, and that's going to be the first thing that I do. I structure the classroom. We have to be sure to infuse the phonics at every level, even if the children can read and write. Keep touching over those phonics skills because that's only going to build your vocabulary. We have to test these kids earlier, and testing isn't necessarily a bad thing when you're teaching them what they need to know and they can read. Just early detection of what's going on with these kids and not waiting for third grade tests to catch them. And just the rote learning in all subjects. Rote learning has a limited system, but when you're younger, it works amazing. How many people can remember stuff that happened to them when they was 2? I know M says, munchy mouth, because I learned that in kindergarten and she gave us a cookie. I never stopped with I love when we got to the letter M every week. We was gonna get something to eat. There's a fix for the parents as well. We need to reform the parent perception of what's going on at the preschool level or how their kids really learn. And the Brownsville experience definitely does that. They bring those kids there and the parents see other amazing kids and believe their kids can do the same thing. So we have to show these kids off and just change the perception of what's going on. We need to create access to books and reading opportunities outside of the computer. More when you're driving in the car. Hey, that sign says stop. A real quick story. I'm in my class. I tell the kids, hey, your parents read every day when they're on the bus, when they're bringing you to school. She said, nah, they don't read. I said, ask them why they reading. They're reading the road signs. They're reading the traffic light. They're doing this reading in the car. And one little girl said, Ms. McLeod, my mama be reading. She said she read the signs on the way to school. But they have no idea that their parents are constantly reading because they don't have a book, because they don't understand what reading is, and we have to give them that. We have to strengthen our parents' practices and just give them workshops like this or opportunities that they learn how people learn, because a lot of people can read, but they can't teach anyone else to read because they don't understand the process. We do have to foster a home to school and a school to home kind of development. In my class, I send positive and negative through the Remind app all the time, just constantly. One parent said, hey, you call me more than, she said, what did she say? She said, oh, you contact me more than my baby daddy. I will text the good and the bad. I was definitely text the good and the bad. So definitely foster home to school relationship. And with that, she knew she could also contact me through that Remind app. I am actually going to turn it over to the owner of Brownsville. But before that, Eddie Oliver is going to introduce her.
Hello again.
Any projection.
Hello again. Now here to introduce one of my teachers, Miss Brown Rita. Rita Brown's Miss Brown is the founder and owner of Brownsville Preparatory Institute in Tallahassee, Florida. She's originally from New York City and came to Tallahassee in 2003. Brownsville was founded in 2006. The mission of educating and inspiring children to achieve the top of their potential. Miss Brown knew from her own experiences homeschooling the children that are 3 and 4 years old learn to read. That 3 and 4 year olds can learn to read. Brownsville helped me to learn to read. And I am only 4 years old. Please welcome Mrs. Rita Brown of Brownsville Preparatory Institute.
All right.
Can we all say excellent, not exceptional?
Excellent, not exceptional.
Excellent,
Excellent.
not exceptional. We never, ever, ever want to take away. Boy, leave my address alone. 4. And it's okay.
Yeah.
And excellent, not exceptional. Okay, I'm gonna cry. I have to stop because I'm gonna cry. Welcome. I gotta compose myself. We've been doing this for 11 years, and it never ever makes me feel any less proud. Each and every day, each and every time I see one of my children being exactly who I know they are.
Yes.
I walk into the building each and every day knowing that they will be what I perceive they will be. And anybody that walks into my space and does not believe that has to go. A lot of times people tell me, my name is Rita Brown. Thank you for inviting me. A lot of people tell me that the reason that we are able to do what we do is because we're a private environment. We're not like public schools who don't get to select the children that they see and don't get a chance to put people out when they're not doing what you want them to do. I'm here today to tell you that that is not how we operate. When I see the challenge, it gives me inspiration to make the difference. When we see the challenge, it gives me the inspiration to make the difference. Because here's what I know about our children. I know they can. How do I know they can? Because I raised 3 children and I did everything that everyone said you should do. I lived a good life. I owned a business that was successful. We moved from New York City to the suburbs because by the time my 2nd and 3rd child were going to be ready to start preschool and school, we needed to live in a neighborhood where I didn't feel I had to pay for private schools. So we did everything that you're supposed to do. Well, I moved to the bedroom community and I paid the high taxes and I lived in the nice house and I sent my children to school. And because they would not sit in the seat the way you thought they should sit in the seat, or because they asked the question that you felt, why are you asking that? They were ostracized. It was looked at differently. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it was looked at differently. I was the involved parent. I volunteered. And I found out that my volunteerism, because you know what they say about us in the community, we don't go volunteer, we don't go to meetings, we don't go. And I was confused. I'm like, okay, so they're saying I need to volunteer. I'm volunteering. Why don't they want me to come?
Right.
Why are they giving me file folders in the corner?
Right.
You know, I'm saying I can sit down and read with children. I can do this. I can do that. And they kept giving me these tasks. You know, go make some cupcakes. You know, and I was like, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. So finally, one day, my son, by the time he was in the 2nd grade, my oldest son, by the time he was in the 2nd grade, he told his teacher to kiss his. There are children in the room. And this was not a threat in our household. This was, you know, I was the parent that said, if they don't do their work, I need to know. If they don't, I need to know because I know what I expect from my children. And it dawned on me, the fact that this child in 2nd grade would tell a teacher to, we'll do that for lack of, something else was going on.
Right.
Something else was going on. He was coming home. He was complaining about his teacher. He had a male teacher. I was happy that he had a male teacher. But he had a male teacher who had this idea and perception in his head
Right.
of my son
Right.
and his curiosity. So what did he do? Every single day, if my son was finished with his work, I say, give him more work to do. Here's what my son knows. He knows that you cannot do your work. Your teacher can never tell me you didn't do your work. So guess what he used to do? He'd get his work done and then cut up. So I'm like, I will send more work if you don't want to give it. He has to learn how to sit in his seat. And, you know, we'll be okay. What I didn't know is that he was terrorizing him every day.
Of course.
He was dehumanizing him every day.
Of course.
He was letting him know that he was going to be nothing.
Yeah.
So the one day that he heard it enough, because he's at home here and you are amazing, you are great, you are this, and someone is telling you you are nothing. That was the day he told him that. So the principal called me and said, Miss Brown, you know, we're going to have to suspend him for 2 days because, you know, it's inappropriate behavior. I came up to school. I said, no, he will not be suspended. He says, no, Miss Brown, we really do have to suspend him. I said, no, I'm going to take him home. And I took him out of the building. I said, oh, by the way, go over there to that first grade class and get my other son. He's coming too. Well, no, he's fine. Well, you see, that was my son who was, you know, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. No, go get him too. Because you know what? I'm not getting up in the morning to bring one when I have to stay home and teach the other. I knew nothing about education, friends. Well, I'm not going to say I knew nothing about education. I went to school. I did kindergarten, first, second, third grade. I said to myself, now, mind you, my oldest is 35. That son I'm talking about is now 29 years old. I'm like, you can figure this out. I mean, it can't be hard, you know, no minimizing what teachers go through. And think about how long ago that was. Homeschooling was not a common thread in our community. So all of my friends who knew me were saying, what are you doing? You know, that's crazy. What about socialization? You know, they're not going. The Museum of Natural History was a train ride away. The Science Center was a drive away. The grocery store was our math store. That's how we learned how to do math in the grocery store. I was reading because that was impromptu reading. Go get me the can of Del Monte tomatoes with salt free. They had to find it on the shelves. So we were okay. Life was good. And then I said, okay, well, you know what? I don't want to jack my kids up, so I'm going to have to start. We need another plan. And I did that. So I went and had them tested. And I was like, oh, shucks, they grew 2 years in this 1 year.
Wow.
Fear of testing, gone. Life moved on. We moved to Tallahassee. My daughter came to Florida A&M University at the age of 15 years old. How come? Because we taught her how to read when she was 3 years old. And she went to private school in New York City, and they skipped her. We actually held her back 1 year because she would have been probably 13 years old, 12, 14 years old going to college because she couldn't ride a bike. You know, and if this table was sitting here, she'd walk into the table. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, there's some other stuff we need to work on. She had sense. Much of it was not common. So we held her back a year. I put her in the local public school. She came home the first day with her book, and she's like, Ma, look at this. I said, look, baby, it's not about school this year. I said, when you finish doing what the teacher said, just go to the back of the book and just do the back of the book. And she started doing the back of the book. You know what happened, right? The back of the book caught to the front of the book. And I expected that to happen, but I expected the teacher who I had already told that this was an intelligent child would say, okay, I need to figure something else out. What did she do? She admonished my child. She admonished my child. And I was like, okay, this year of learn how to ride a bike was over with. We need to get back to the business of learning. So, of course, we moved her again, brought her back home, did some more homeschooling until I didn't want to do this. I did not want to do this. I was forced to do it because the one thing that I knew was that the sum total and value of my life is that which I produce.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm good for anything in this world, I need to be good for what I produce.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward on those children and we will get started. My daughter is a business professor at Florida A&M University. My son, the problem child, he's an investment banker at Goldman Sachs.
Wow.
In San Francisco. My youngest child is an engineer at Adobe in San Francisco. I've not ever paid a college bill. I'm proud of that.
Yes.
They took out student loans because I'm also a believer in earn your way. They took out student loans for spring break. The only thing that I ever did was buy a car for each one. I bought a car for each one, but each one out of the scholarship that they received had to pay their own insurance. Because I was a firm believer that I did the early investment. That's what I call it, the early investment plan. And the early investment plan says, I give you a foundation, you better daggone build a house. And I think that's also a challenge that we as parents and educators have to kind of roll back on, because, so often we want to give our children more than we had. They have more than we had. they have more than we had. What are we feeling guilty about? Each generation progresses. So with all of that said, by time they were grown, gone, and off to college, that was another thing. They couldn't live home during college. All three went to Florida A&M University. I did by that time live in Tallahassee because I sent a 15-year-old to Florida from New York. And they were like, Mom, why do we have to, we'll have more money if we stay home. Yeah, but you got to come out of here. So they all had to live on campus or make their way in housing. And I think that as a result of that, it cut that whole, I'm going to come back and sit on Mom as they went forward. So at that point, I said, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? My daughter was now in Arizona doing her PhD. And she was like, Mom, I'm a little bit concerned because you're not doing anything right now. And, when I'm talking to you, I'm not feeling the normal stimulation that I feel when we talk. So you need to go do something. And you know what? That's real. Because when you're not using that brain, guess what? You are losing that brain. So she said, start a school. I said, you can't. She said, start a homeschool. I said, you can't start a homeschool because you can't educate other people's children. She said, Mom, call it a daycare. And this is my daughter now kind of like telling me what I should be doing with the rest of my life. And I'm like, okay, so I don't know anything about this. What do I do? Nobody knows me in this town. What do I do? She said, well, first thing you need to do, the major thing. I said, I don't know if I like other people's children. That's real. We do what we do for our own.
Right.
But I didn't know if I liked other people's children, and I did not want to be the harm to others that I felt mine were placed in. Right. So she said, Mom, you got to go get a job. I said, okay, get a job where? She said, at a daycare center. So I'm like, that should be easy. I put applications in for jobs at daycare centers, and I was not getting a job. I could not imagine why I was not getting a job. She said, Mom, send me a resume. And of course, in my resume, I put all the things that I had done in my life, it led me up to this moment, and no one was hired. She sent me back a resume. Raised my children, they're in college, need a job. And I got hired. Problem number one with education. Okay, problem number one with education. I took the job and I said to myself, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to go in. They're going to find out that I'm awesome and amazing. And they're going to want to know what I do. And I'm not going to share what I do because I got a plan and I'm not trying to train anybody into my plan. So I figured that's what would happen, that they would ask me to do, help them do. Nope. They gave me the 3-year-olds, figured they couldn't mess up a 3-year-old with me until the 3-year-olds in 3 weeks were outperforming the 4-year-olds. They came to me and said, we have a problem. I'm like, what? Parents are complaining. Oh, my parents are complaining? No, not the ones in your room, the 4-year-old parents. And I'm like, well, I'm not even teaching their kids. What are they complaining about? Well, they have a 3-year-old in your class. And the 3-year-old is coming home knowing more than the 4-year-old. Oops. I said, well, what do you want me to
What?
Help. She says, no, I really want you to stick to the curriculum that we've provided.
Oh.
I said, well, I'm going to have to hand in my 2 weeks notice.
I know that's right.
Because at the end of the day, I don't know how to do less.
Wow.
You know?
You
And I walked away. I walked away and went home and said, okay, now I realized, but I did, it was good. My daughter was right. Because I like kids. I almost forgot why I was there. And I intentionally went and found businesses on the other side of town because I also believe in karma. And I said, I don't want to go in someone's backyard and then, you know, open up and then draw up parents. So I left. And of course, all the parents want to know, well, where's Miss Brown? When I'd see him in the supermarket. And I'm like, oh, no. And my daughter had a mentor, Dr. Shanta Friday. She's a big thread in my whole story. And Dr. Friday had always told my daughter, I can't imagine how amazing you are. How did you do this? She said, oh, my mom homeschooled me. She called Dr. Friday. She said, my mom is thinking about starting a homeschool. Dr. Friday said, I have a 4-year-old. I'm sending him. This is pre-Facebook posting and all this other kind of stuff. Sent her son. And in 2 weeks, I had him reading. And she sent an email to all of her friends and sorors. And the floodgates of Brownsville were officially open. So Brownsville Prep, our mission is to educate and inspire children to achieve the top of their potential. We accomplish this through hard work, positive attitudes. And we all read that already. Thank you, Bridget. I did that? Why you let me hold it? I'll hold it down here. Okay. Hard work. We have high expectations that result in high achievement, as you can so well see with my friend Eddie Oliver and the myriad of other children that come to the Brownsville Preparatory Institute. Our vision is to inspire and to challenge the future of our children. And we do this each and every day because we believe. So what are we here for? We're here because we want you to know, because I know that you are all school-age teachers, principals, professors, and things of that nature. But I want you to know that fluency matters. And so often, you know, I know about the process of teaching children sight words, and if they know a certain amount of sight words by a certain time, that's going to help their reading and things of that nature. Sight words are important because they are not phonetically sound. And because sight words are not phonetically sound, they are words that you do have to memorize. So there is value in the sight word list. But in Brownsville, we use the sight word list as spelling words. And the reason we use them as spelling words is because it runs in tandem. It runs in tandem with the ability to future teach them how to write. Because guess what? You might have taught them how to sound out words, but now that they're writing, said is S-A-I-D. How many of your children wrote said, S-E-D? That's because they were sounding it out. And then remember, whole language came into play. And remember inventive spelling that came into play. We ruined a generation of children with inventive spelling. We ruined a generation of children with inventive spelling. So at Brownsville, we don't do that. At Brownsville, we phonetically teach them not only how to learn their letters and sounds, but how to rapid fire letters and sounds. Parents tell me all the time, oh, they know their letters. But if I put a chart in front of them and I do, all they've said is the first letter. They have not kept up with my hand, which means reading is going to be a problem. So even if your children know their letters and sounds, I challenge you if you're a second grade, third grade, fourth grade, or even fifth grade teacher, I challenge you to put a list on the board of random alphabet words and see if your class can keep up with you. If they can't keep up with you, you know what you need to work on, because fluency will ruin, a lack of fluency will ruin the ability for children to actually have adequate reading skills. So we tracked this child, little Xavier. And this is Xavier when he was 2.5 years old. And at 2.5 years old, at 2.5 years old, we recorded Xavier.
Yeah. Al is a cat. Your time, Xavier.
L has a pen.
Al has J and
Pen.
Oh, see. Read right here. Ow.
Ow.
Use your finger.
Ow. Half. And. Oh. And. Yeah.
Ow is a fat cat. No.
Oh, I have another.
Comprehension. Comprehension.
Your turn, Zaza.
Ow.
Now.
Ow. Ow is a. Ow is a sad, fat, cat.
Uh-oh, he's fat. Al ran, and ran. Zaza's turn.
Oh. Ow is a cat.
Oh, good job. Did you like this book, Zaza? Yes. This was a good book.
Mama,
Oh, read the question at the end.
Mama, will be done.
One more story and we're done? Okay.
100.
100 stories?
Yes.
Do you like to read, Zaza?
Yes.
Oh.
100 stories.
100 stories. All right. Well, we got 99 more to go.
Okay, this is Xavier today. Xavier is now, he just turned 5.
My name is Xavier Gonzalez, and I am 5 years old. I will read The Magic Tree House Dinosaurs Before Dark by Mary Pope Osborne. Help! A monster said, and yeah, sure said that.
By 5, he understands inflection.
Whoa, Jack.
He's not pointing anymore. His eyes have been able to keep up with him.
This is what God was thinking the time with 7-year-old sister. Annie loved pretend. Yeah. But Jack was 8.5. He liked real things.
Watch his eyes. You see, he's interested in what he's doing.
Watch out, Jack. The monster's coming with you.
This is a fidgety child who does not stay in his seat, who constantly gets in
No thanks, said
trouble
Jack.
every day.
Annie raced alone into the woods. Jack looked at the sky. The sun was about to set. Come on, Annie, it's time to go home. But Annie had disappeared. Jack waited. No, Annie. Annie!
Earlier reading that he was going slow on was choice. It had nothing to do with fluency.
Come here. Jack groaned. This better be good. He left the road and headed into the woods. The trees were lit with the golden late afternoon light.
So, how does that happen? That happens very, very easily. We started testing these children back in 2013. I actually used to test them earlier than that. My son-in-law is a psychologist. One day a parent said to me as I was bragging about the results of the children, how do we know you're not cooking the books? I was like, you know what? That's a very good point. So, you know what we did? We went out and got, where's it at? Oh, did I turn it off? Bridget. Oh, it doesn't work on the screen. I'm used to white screens. Okay. We went outside and got independent testing. And we started taking them to testing facilities so that they would be able to independently test them so that nobody could think that we were cooking our books. Here you have test date May 2015, 3-year-old. May 2016, this is a 4-year-old. This is the same child. Now, at this point, the child was 3 years old. Well, look, oh my gosh, look at the scores. He's not doing so well. But this was a 3-year-old child taking a K SAT 10. SAT 10 is a 5-hour, 4-hour a day test for 2 days in order to get all of these measures. The fact that we got a 3-year-old to sit in a seat and do this is an amazing feat in itself. Our aim at 3 years old is not for measure. Our aim at 3 years old is to get them used to the testing atmosphere. That's it. Actually, we didn't even expect results, but we actually wound up getting them. Here's this child 1 year later. Look at this child now. 4 years old, grade average, 2.1. Oh, you all know what 2.1 means. Second grade, first month. Exactly. Letters and sounds, 1.6. Word reading, 1.8. Sentence reading, 1.7. This is a 4-year-old child who technically...
Not even in school yet.
Not even in pre-K.
Not even in school yet. Doing these kinds of things, okay? And with all of that said, now, and by the way, this particular child was also was one of those friends. Was, you know, that we all had them. But the point is, it does not matter.
Yes.
It does not matter. It does not matter that he don't want to sit in his seat. I don't care if you read under your seat. Okay? I don't care where you read. You know, listen, all studies are now showing. What did you do in your classroom this year?
In my classroom, I took out the seating and I put flexible seating. So I allowed
Flexible seating. Okay. So we've set our classrooms up with flexible seating. So we've set our classrooms up in a way that is enticing to them. We do center-based learning. So guess what? You can go play over there, Johnny, with something that's learning, put a puzzle together, blocks, whatever the case may be, while the teacher can sit there with small group and work from a differentiated standpoint at 3 and 4 years old. If we can do it at 3 and 4 years old, why can't we do it at K, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years old? We can, and we will. Here we have a child. This child has some emotional issues, for real. Emotional issues, but it doesn't stop learning. This child is also a 4-year-old child, okay? Was this a 4 or 3? This is a 4-year-old child. This is a 4-year-old child, even with his challenges. But now, we let this kid go into first grade. We're a first grade environment now. We're a K-1 environment now. We became a K-1 environment, not because I really wanted to, but because we had to. By the time our children were this age, parents were screaming that we had to now send them to school and put them in kindergarten. As a daycare, we did not have the opportunity to skip a child into the grade that they belong in. We took on K-1 so that we had the private school right to put them where they belong. If a child stays with us through their K year, and we test, and we know that all the social emotional is in place with the child, we're putting those Ks in second grade the next year. We are putting them in second grade. And the reason we're putting them in, we have record and data that shows that putting them in second grade has not done anything to their social emotional along the way. But here's what we know. We know if we put them into their right grade, we're looking for, if there is no problem, we're going to create a problem because there's nothing for them to do in the grade that we're putting them in. Okay? So the only opportunity we have is to move them forward. Here we have some more data that show this is a 4-year-old child. Again, you can see the results. Now, realize this, okay? The maximum points to achieve on these children. The amount, I think it's something like 200 questions on this test. Okay, in all different areas. This was another 4-year-old child. Look at this one. 4.0 math procedures. How come you can do, at 4 years old, why can't she do math procedures in the fourth, at 4 years old, why can't she do 4th grade math procedures? Here's how come. We run in a phase-based environment. It's ability. It's all about ability. I don't care if you're 5 years old. If you were in phase one is where you're going. You don't know your letters and sounds. You don't know how to blend or read. You're going in phase 1. I don't care if there's a 3-year-old in the classroom. All y'all going to be there together because we don't have an environment that invites teasing and why are you here and all that other kind of nonsense. He's going to get the skills he needs. They're going to move through and they're going to get to phase 3. So this child, based on starting at 3, doing the way she was doing, home matters, supportive parent, this is what happened. By the time you get to phase 3, in phase 3, by the end of the year, and these are average kindergarten age children, but I will put a 4-year-old in phase 3 if they're ready for phase 3. They have to know all of their letters and sounds. They have to know how to read chapter books. They're writing. They know all their multiplication tables to 12 by the end of their kindergarten year. And the reason for that is because math matters. And we know that if they have the multiplication tables in, we know measurement works, we know division works, we know algebra works, we know everything works if multiplication, because of course before multiplication was what? Adding, division, regrouping, you know, all the things that come before that. So we were able to do that.
You have 2 minutes if I to tell you.
There you go. my friend Eddie Oliver, okay, the one that you just saw here reading. Eddie took this test. He was still 3?
No, he was 4.
He had just turned 4? This was at the end of this physical school year, okay? His total reading, 1.2. Total letters and sounds, K9. 1.5 in his word reading. K9 in math. That means he's ready for first grade. Eddie goes into phase 3 this fall as one of those children that is going to be in that position. Oh, vowel combination. Okay. Anybody, what I can just say this. Anybody, we actually at this point had some things that we were going to show you that we're going to bring you to a point where, how do y'all do that? There's some tools. If you are interested in that, I have no problem emailing it to you. And if you just leave your name and email on a paper right here, I'll be more than happy to contact you.
And we are working with Ms. Brown to systemize what she does and make it a template that can go national.
Yeah. And I'm gonna make an executive decision too. Ms. Brown, if you have time, we have some time in the afternoon after the closing session. So what I would, you know, I know some of you are very interested, as am I. If you want to come back over here,
I have no problem.
We have some space. If you want to do a Q&A, because I think what she's doing is amazing. Yes. And I know that my company is going to help and have what we can. And that, by the way, that's my nephew. I'm just saying. Even though he's not exceptional, you know. I'm just saying.
He's exceptional to you. He's exceptional to you. Exactly.
Let's give it up for what? Oh my God. And I was back in the back, just with tears in my eyes. I can't even.
I couldn't even start without the tears.
And the excitement. Xavier, was that his name?
Xavier.
And this young lady is the one that's going to. Miss Rita, you have to meet this. This is the teacher of the year for Duval County. But what this young lady, what she's doing with her, she's teaching her parents how to do math on Facebook Live. What grade do you teach? 4th grade. She teaches 4th grade. The math is tough. So she's teaching her parents the math at a Title I school. So she decided that I got to help the parents help the kids. Come on now. You understand what I'm saying to you? This young 27-year-old young lady. And I made sure she came here to meet you.
Wonderful.
And what's happening here, can't you feel it? Yes. Oh my goodness. And how we're going to change America.
Yes.
That he's not exceptional. That's
right. He is excellent.
Excellent. And so are the kids in our classrooms.
That's right.
So anyway, she's going to be back here afterwards. Come back in here, Miss Rita. After the closing session, any of you that are really interested, and I will say it from the stage if you remind me.
No problem.
So we got to get to, you know, if you want to stay here, don't get me in trouble with Dr. Chester. So it's almost 12:15. You want to